Laura Stanfill. How are you today?
I'm great, Rich. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with the creative community.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. Let me give a brief introduction here for you so that the audience kind of gets a feel for who you are and some of the things that you've done. You are a publisher and founder of Forest Avenue Press, a small press founded in 2012 that has grown into one known for publishing critically praised fiction. You're also an author of singing lessons for the Stylish Canary, plus numerous short form works in outlets like Shondaland, The Rumpus, Catapult, and various print anthologies. You're the winner of multiple awards and honors, Regional Arts and Cultural Council grant in the spring of 2023, shortlisted for the May Sarton Book Award in 2022, selected in Best Fiction of 22 by Powell's Books, and Best Book of 2022 by Independent Book Review. You are recognized for your contributions in literary publishing, the Oregon Literary Fellowship for Publishing in 2021, honor at Publishers Weekly Star Watch Awards in 2017, and you're an advocate for marginalized voices, praised by authors of color for lifting voices often marginalized and for creating a welcoming publishing environment and for seeing stories beyond stereotypical framing. That is very fascinating. Very fascinating. One of the things that I mentioned was there's not a whole lot of structure to the podcast other than the very first question. And that takes us all the way back in time to where were you born and what was life like as a kid for Laura?
I love this question. I grew up on a tree-lined street in suburban New Jersey
Okay,
in a historic register home that was built in 1920.
very cool.
And even though it looked like the other homes in our neighborhood, inside was a veritable museum of oddities. My parents are collectors.
Interesting.
So my father particularly collected instruments that made music or sounds, or you might say noise, depending on the
Okay.
type of collection.
Yeah.
Um, he would restore old broken things and make them play again in his spare time when he wasn't working. And so every room of the house was a little bit different than all of my Gen X classmates' houses. Our dining room did not have a dining table or chairs or like a china hutch. It had player pianos and air horns my father had restored off of trains.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. What type of work did he do outside of collecting?
He ran a small business with his dad and brother and grandfather. So
Okay. And what type of business was it?
it was it was epoxy,
A what?
epoxy like the glue.
Oh, epoxy. Got
Yeah,
you. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
All right. So did they do like surface epoxy or were they making the actual epoxy itself?
They were making the actual epoxy.
Okay, got you. All right. How about mom? Was she a stay-at-home mom or did she
Mostly
work?
stay at home. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Were your grandparents very much involved in your childhood or in engaging at all?
Very much so. My dad's parents were very sweet and reserved and polite, and they were very much um, both sets of grandparents lived in New Jersey near me, and then over through my teenage years, they moved to Florida. But so I had one set of grandparents that was very reserved, and everything was beautiful in their house and very thought out. And then my mom's parents were very much more like, let's play cards together and let's go pick grapefruit off the tree and let's go to the beach. So I think some of it was the age difference because that set of grandparents was a little younger.
Okay. Okay. And did that wanting to play cards, did that kind of inspire the connection?
I think so. Um, we I also loved to make things from when I was really small. And so that set of grandparents, I was often making little dolls out of their clothespins or painting salt and pepper sets for them to use at their table. And they had, I'm an only child, so I
Okay.
had four cousins on the other side, but I think I was the grandchild who was always like creating something for them
Yeah.
to appreciate and enjoy. I would write poems together with that grandfather too.
Oh, very good. Very good.
Yeah.
So that side, you had a little bit more creative freedom and opportunity just based on their living environment as well, compared
Yeah.
to the structured, everything had its place, all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. How about elementary school? Were you one of those kids that kind of wanted to just sit towards the back of the class and fade into the background? Or were you more engaging and wanted to be closer to the front?
I preferred sitting in the back until I realized that I couldn't actually see the blackboard. So
Okay,
once I got glasses, I got to resume my preferences.
sure.
My mom's always joked she's kept again being an only child. My mom's kept like a whole set of records of my life, and she told me this, and then many years later I got to see it for myself. My teachers were always worried about me in the first semester of school. I was very quiet. I looked like I had a lot to contribute, but I did not contribute it. I would not raise my hand willingly. I did not join group discussions in class. And by the end of the year, of course, I had gotten a lot more comfortable and I felt connected to the teacher and the classmates. And I would come out of my shell by the end of the year. And then it would start all over again the next year because I don't do very well with transition and change. And it would take me
Okay.
much of the year to feel like I had something of use to share and I felt safe enough to share it. So,
Yeah, I get it. I totally get it. I was that kid too, in terms of just wanting to fade into the background. I was always quiet, just observing. I just wanted to watch and look and see what was going on. Um, Very self-conscious in terms of being called on and that kind of stuff.
yeah, same.
Totally get it. And then into as well, even that experience that you have it where it took you to the second semester just to get comfortable in that environment. I still have that today. It's difficult to try and step into something and feel comfortable right away. Usually
Totally.
usually takes a while for me to get calmed down enough to be able to sit in a place. Um, how about friendships early on? Did you have a few, or did you have many, or was it just maybe one?
I very early on, I had one, and her name is Bess, and we were 2.5 when we met. She moved next to my younger grandparents, and so I remember that's my first memory. I remember going to grandma's house and sitting on the couch, and there was another kid who was about my age and about my size, sitting on the other side of the couch. And I just remember staring at her going, why is there another child here? Like, who is this? And I don't know.
Yeah.
But we're still best friends. So all these
Oh,
years later.
really?
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah. And from there, she moved away when we were six, 5 or 6. I guess it was after kindergarten. And we stayed in touch by being pen pals by sending letters and cards and by having the occasional phone call where one parent or the other would eventually cut us off because long distance was expensive.
Right. Yeah.
But we got that. And then I met my other really amazing group of friends in fifth grade when I changed schools. And I had that group of friends through middle school, through high school, through college, and through now. So I feel really lucky that many people from my past are still part of my present.
Right. Right. Did once you got to know Bess, did she start to almost feel like a sister to you?
Absolutely. We were both only children,
Okay.
and our moms would take us places together. People assumed we were sisters.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we fought like sisters. I remember, especially growing up in those middle school, high school years, which one of us is dating, which one of us has more acne, like which one of us has a better haircut.
Yeah.
Bess was always in the theater program, and I was always writing, and so we had a lot of similarities. And also, I remember thinking about her as being better than me or smarter than me or having more friends than me, and how you tend to judge while you're trying to figure out who you are in the world, especially as a creative person.
Yeah.
And I feel so lucky that the person that was in my life like that um, was so funny and kind and feeling the same way about me,
Yeah.
and feeling like I was doing all these things that she couldn't possibly do. And so we
Oh
were
wow.
kind of a mutual admiration society that every once
Yeah.
in a while would bubble up into disagreement, I guess, like sibling disagreement.
Okay.
But it was never, we never had big drop down knockout fights
Yeah.
emotionally, because we respected each other too much, and it was always such a gift when our parents got us together because there were
Yeah.
plane tickets involved and figuring out where we could stay, if we were staying with them, if we would stay in a hotel. Um, it was our families made a really big commitment to keeping us together.
That's amazing. And I would venture to say a bit unusual
Mhm.
as well. Um, but fascinating that both sets of parents recognize that, hey, there's a connection here. We don't have additional children, so let's nurture this.
Yeah,
Let's see how we can keep this going and together. And I imagine they were just as much companions of each other as well on these
for
trips.
sure.
The
Yep.
parents
Yep.
engaged. Yeah,
Yeah, we all got along so well and still do. And I also love that when you find that person in your life, if the parents are are embracing of it, those parents also become like family as well. And so
yeah,
I called Bess's parents aunt and uncle. And I remember a lot in college and in my 20s, I would call her mom to chat about things and touch base and just be part of their lives like another daughter, just the way Bess and my parents have that relationship as well. So,
yeah, for sure. I get it. I understand that for sure. Calling them aunt and uncle. When I was little, all my family, both sides of the family, are from East Tennessee,
mhm,
and my parents came up here because my dad was a mechanic, and so Detroit, being the automotive capital, it was easy for him to find work. So we really didn't have any relatives that were up here. My dad had a brother and a sister that were here for a short period of time, because we have a Air National Guard base here where I'm at, and his sister was her husband was stationed there, and then his younger brother was up here for a little while trying to do work as well. But we didn't have any cousins or grandma and grandpas or anything like that up here in Michigan. So the people that lived next door to us had kind of a large family, and they would babysit me while my parents would be at work or whatever. And so they kind of just took us into the family almost. So I ended up calling the oldest one grandma, called the her children aunts and uncles and stuff. So I get it. It's wonderful to be able to experience those things as a kid when you don't have a large extension of your family close to you.
Yep, for sure. It's broadening. And it's also, I mean, back to that word safety. I don't think I could have found language for that back then. But when I
Yeah,
would show up at school, I knew people were going to judge me by how I dressed or what I said, or if I answered the math problem question wrong.
yeah,
But whenever I saw Bess, whatever continent or whatever, wherever she was living with her family, I knew I would be accepted. And I knew I didn't have to put on an identity for like a slimmed down version of my identity that would be palatable to them. They wanted all of me. They wanted me
yeah,
as me. So it's just such a gift when another family embraces you like that and is like, yeah, you're our people too.
for sure, for sure. Did some of the writing that you started doing early on, did it come out of that um, sense of feeling kind of like an outsider or not feeling comfortable around others?
Absolutely. I think for a really long time, speaking my thoughts and having conversations with people uh, terrified me. Because
Okay.
I knew I had a sense, I mean, I'm neurodivergent, and I had a sense back then, before I had language to describe that, that the kids who were my peers in my classes knew a lot more about social expectations and uh, things, the right things to listen to or the wrong things to listen to. I felt like
Yeah.
there was a code in society, and I didn't know the code or how to crack it. And so my
Gotcha.
best guess was to try to just be invisible or try to stay quiet, tuck down, and hope that nobody calls on me. But with writing, I could explore what I was thinking. I had the time to ruminate and revise. I didn't have to be called out on the spot to have an answer. I could start by playing with story or playing with language and poetry. And if I didn't like it, I could just cross it out. And nobody had to see that first draft. Nobody was judging me based on my
Right.
first attempt at communicating something. And so that really opened up my life in a way that, at the time, I'm not sure I acknowledged it as life-changing. But by the time, I mean, I've been writing my whole life, but
Yeah.
I would say by fifth grade, I realized that what I could do with words was special in a good way, not special in a let's make fun of her way.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I I think the credit for that goes to my fifth grade teacher, Mrs. Ravis,
Okay.
because we were writing stories in her class. And somehow we got to share bits and pieces of stories, and I started writing novels. And I remember my classmates begging Mrs. Ravis to let me do story time because they wanted to know what happened next in my novel. Like it was
Wow.
beyond just sharing the work of with your peers. It was like, we
Yeah.
need to hear what happens in the dog's story. Can you continue? And there were lines in my two novels I wrote in that class. I don't remember much about them, but there were lines that my classmates loved so much that they would repeat them to me in the halls. And like for years later, they would repeat bits of language from my storytelling. And that's where I stopped. I mean, I guess I still felt like an outsider, like it wasn't, not everybody could do this. But
Yeah.
for the first time, it felt like an asset, like a talent, like something that I could do that nobody else could do. And that was a good thing. So.
Yeah. I can imagine. Holy cow. Yeah, especially if you're experiencing that, what some would call societal rejection, as much as that can fit into a elementary school,
Mhm.
um, just because you're different, um, quieter. A lot of times, I think when kids are quieter, other kids have a tendency to bully them and pick on them because they're not exhibiting a whole lot of emotional response to things. And so people think that that's strange,
Mhm.
especially outgoing individuals, um, which is it's disappointing.
Yeah.
But I understand what it's like because I was one of those kids. I was that kid who was always quiet. I could engage at certain times and certain points of interest, but otherwise, I was just observing. I was watching everybody. I just wanted to see how they moved, how they acted.
Yeah.
Uh,
The wheel's always turning. Same.
yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Um, that's amazing that they started recognizing and actually remembering
Yeah.
sentences and aspects of what you were writing that would just continually be brought up again. Um, I can exactly see how that would open a little bit of that confidence
Mhm.
box within you, uh,
Yeah.
to at least allow you to start moving forward with a little bit of those uplifted shoulders,
Yeah.
maybe head tilted up just a little bit more.
Exactly.
That's fascinating. Um, when you started to realize that, oh wow, they're really paying attention to me, and it's not necessarily focused on me, but it's focused on this thing that I'm creating. Did that, did it surprise you, or did it create, like I'm saying, that bit more of confidence of being able to rise up a little bit in posture and start to feel like you could navigate um, the environment of school at that point in time?
It definitely helped me engage better
Yeah,
and more fully with my peers, even my non-friends. I felt like I was being known for something and I could do
yeah,
this
yeah,
really cool thing. And yeah, it was definitely like shoulders back, head up a little bit. And from there, those friendships only grew tighter and closer. I mean, I wasn't friends with everybody in the class, um, but I was able to engage and connect in a way that I think in elementary school I was still so reserved and still holding so much back. By
yeah,
sharing words on the page, I was really showing myself, showing my heart, my spirit, and my
yeah,
sense of humor probably too. It took a lot more years before I realized I was actually funny, um, but I'm pretty sure that those stories were a little bit funny. So
yeah. Were you very sensitive as a child as well?
so sensitive, yeah.
Okay, yeah, yeah,
Um, both environmentally and emotionally. So if somebody said something that was the slightest bit mean to me, or even someone sitting next to me, I would carry that around all day.
for sure. Yeah, I was. I remember um, seeing Benji, the movie Benji, in the theater,
Yeah.
and there's this scene sticks in my head to this day. I don't remember a whole lot of the whole storyline, but what I do remember is this adult in this kitchen, and he kicked Benji, and he squealed, and immediately I started bawling in the theater. And I'm probably like 5 or 6 years old at that point in time, and the whole theater's turning around looking and it's like, who's this, why is this kid crying, and all this kind of stuff. My mom's trying to calm me down, and I'm like, but he just kicked it, just kicked him. So I could feel that dog's emotion straight through the screen,
Yeah.
uh, at that point. And so I was definitely one of those sensitive kids too. That's why I asked that question. I was like,
Yeah,
okay, they're
same.
starting to
Mine
look.
mine was E.T. and my mom, I was screaming hysterically and my mom had to carry me out of the theater
Oh wow.
because I was so it was the later scenes when they have they're doing experiments on ET, or they're trying to figure out things about him, and it's like a medical
Yeah.
dystopia with white sheets and everything. I have not seen it since then, I don't think, but I couldn't get over that. And then many years, well, a couple years ago, my dad told me the story of watching The Yearling, which is a film I haven't seen. And I think there's a deer in it, and there was violence toward the deer, I believe.
Yeah.
And my father had the same experience as us with those movies, with The Yearling. It was
Oh, wow.
1940s. He
Okay.
was probably like 6, 7, and his parents took him to Radio City Music Hall to listen to the Wurlitzer Theater organ do a live performance of The Yearling, which I believe it was a silent movie, and so the organist was the music for it. My
Yeah.
dad remembers falling in love with the instrument of the organ and listening to the organist, and he also remembers being so scared about the movie. And his father took him outside the theater and explained that this is fiction, this didn't really happen, and this was meant to evoke an emotional response.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think he was able to listen to and watch the rest of it. But he
Oh,
remembers the organist was very famous at the time. And the organist turned around and saw this little kid watching and waved at him. And for my dad, that was that moment of you're in the in club, like you've been seen by someone who does this, who's a
yeah.
performer. So
That's fascinating.
yeah, generationally, it's kind of neat to see the progression.
Yeah, for sure. And with those, at that time in history, the the musician, the organ player, was the one who was creating the tone and emotion of the whole storyline
Yep,
that you couldn't hear, but you could see it play
yep,
out.
yep.
Um, do you think that was a pivotal moment for your dad where he started to become fascinated with those organs and stuff like that? So he started collecting those instruments?
Yeah, yes, exactly. And his big dream starting in middle school or high school was to have his own organ. So that was his big life's journey, was
Wow.
restoring a Wurlitzer theater organ and holding concerts in the barn. He would to build awareness of this really old art form,
Yeah.
and to make sure another one of these great organs did not get pieced out to other people, did not get destroyed, and preserving the legacy from our silent movie days. So yeah, that became his big thing.
Very cool. Very cool. I'm seeing the lines of uh, the creative elements are passed down. Your
Mhm.
grandparents allowing that to flourish when you were with them.
Yeah.
Um,
And my dad's parents, the more classical, restrained ones that would have meals in the dining room with the fancy china on Sundays, they were very supportive of my father's eccentric habits and interest in technology. And
oh wow.
they were at once like a model 1950s family on the outside, but again on the inside, my grandpa had ham radio, and he and my dad and his brother built ham radio kits from scratch. And my father, at some point, he must have been in high school. He got his hands on a small organ, and he was able to like put it together and set it up inside the foyer of the family house. Maybe he was in his 20s. I don't
Okay.
remember the story exactly. And his parents came home from their vacation and they found the front door blocked by this instrument. So I
Oh
think there was a lot of love and appreciation in his household, even though it was kind of a socially stricter environment.
yeah.
Definitely gave him space to putter around and tinker with old trains and model trains and electronic circuit boards and such.
Yeah. That definitely opens up the picture of that contrast that was
Yeah.
earlier set in the conversation. It definitely opens it up. and it's fascinating that they had that more of that interest of curiosity
Mhm.
um, within their own environment, but yet still had to go about these prim and proper ways, for lack of better terminology, but
Yeah.
things that were structured, things that were proper to do,
Yeah.
settings, using specific dishes,
Yeah.
for meals and that kind of stuff. With this newfound um, acceptance with your creative writing and your work in fifth grade, moving into sixth and seventh, did you see that as an opportunity to start to engage even more so with your surroundings and classmates and stuff?
For sure. I feel like sixth grade, even though it gets a bad reputation, was one of my favorite grades because I felt like all those connections I made the year before starting this new school had solidified. And I remember reading books in sixth grade that blew my mind and that I could grapple with intellectually on a level that felt really exciting to me. Animal Farm was one of them.
Okay.
And I was so into it. The considering the society and the different animals. I mean, again, I probably haven't read it since sixth grade,
Yeah.
um, but it made a huge impression on me that I could spend time with a text and form my own opinions and have conversations about those opinions and how the text works. Like it just unlocked something about reading for me that I had not understood. And then seventh grade, Mr. Boucher, my humanities English teacher, had us work on John Steinbeck's The Pearl for months. And it's like, I don't know, a 100-page book, 150-page book. I guess we would probably call it a novella these days. But we
Okay.
spent so much time on the Pearl. And I thought it was the most remarkable learning experience of my entire academic career up to seventh grade.
Yeah.
And I loved it so much. And I remember some of my peers going, "Oh, we're doing the Pearl again." I'm like, I love it. The metaphors and the just the thinking and the questions that our teacher asked. And I was all in.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah, he was amazing. He was one of a number of teachers who saw my potential and got how excited I was when I was approaching the material and encouraged me to do that. So,
Yeah, I was just about to ask that exact question. Like, were those two teachers, Mrs. Revis and Mr. Boucher, were they the ones that really saw who you were with this ability and kind of wanted to, again, nurture that and allow that to slip into who you were and
yeah,
develop? Yeah,
yeah, absolutely.
very cool. It's always huge, I believe, in a child's life at any point in time when they get some validation outside of the home doors.
Mhm.
And they get that recognition or that kindness from a teacher or an adult that really sees potential in them, even though they may be so different from a lot of the other students and quieter, especially. Somebody recognizes that, but they see past that quietness, that shyness, into it's almost like they see your soul and
Mhm.
understand that you're different already, and
Yeah,
we want to let you know that it's okay and safe to be able to move
yeah,
with that. Yeah,
yeah.
that's fascinating.
I think there was that switch that flipped where feeling different and thinking differently stopped being a social deficit and began
Right.
transforming into a creative mind, an interesting thinker,
Yeah.
a hard worker, all a creative person.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think that, I mean, also I had great high school teachers too. I mean, I had a lot of great teachers in my life. And I don't think any of them would be surprised that I write books and that I publish people. I suspect that a lot of my early teachers would be surprised that I do podcasts and I stand up in front of people and run an hour and a half workshop and
Oh,
I
wow.
can't do keynotes without notes. You know, it's that has been a lot of hard work and practice and acknowledgement of being able to open up to someone else. Of
Yeah.
course, it's all within the literary creative world. Like, yes, this is a conversation I can have, but if I was on a mathematics podcast, I would be like, I don't know. I can't even look at you because I don't know.
Right.
I don't remember algebra, you know.
Yeah.
But with creative people, I can open up, and it's I guess I've had to go through a series of doors and transformations as an adult as well to acknowledge that my creative path is worth sharing with other people. Because even if I'm younger than they are, or if they've published more books than I have experience as a publisher and a writer that can
Yeah.
help them frame their own creative failures and their own creative struggles in a way that makes it less about their talent and more about well, we live in a capitalist society and not every book appeals to every reader and so forth and so on. So, yeah,
That's that's huge in terms of growth. It's huge in terms of realization of where your skill sets are and your assets, what you can help other people with. Um, and also, too, it allows you to not get drawn into having to fit into quote unquote a societal norm.
mhm.
You can stay in that creative lane and move confidently through it, and you don't really have to move out of it to
Yeah,
talk about math because,
yeah,
I mean, for me, once I got past multiplication, like it was a foreign language. I didn't understand it at all.
yeah.
It didn't make sense. Um, so I completely understand that aspect of not wanting to have to talk about math. Um, but also too, just the skills and the experiences that you've developed doing your writing, creating the publishing company, all of that type of stuff. Those are huge hurdles and they're huge accomplishments. And then setting yourself up to continue to help others. That's huge.
That's really what publishing is all about. I started my publishing house in 2012 because I saw too many writers with great work not finding a home for it in New York. And they
Mm,
would submit to agents or editors, and nobody was interested. And I was like, why are we here in Oregon writing our own work and then desperately throwing it like spaghetti against the wall to people
yeah,
in New York who are living in these office buildings or working in these office buildings and maybe don't understand our aesthetic? Why couldn't I publish someone here for us here? Like, why does it have to be? So that was kind of the impetus of starting my press, and um, I didn't know what I was getting into, but it's been my I can only publish a handful of writers a year just because I'm one person and I'm
yeah,
kind of a perfectionist and I like to give everybody the time they deserve. But I can teach a whole lot more people. And I was just in Sisters, Oregon, this cute Western town last weekend, and I did a workshop. It was basically an ask me anything about publishing, and we sold out and we had 25 people come with their questions, and I was just like, all right, let's talk about this. Okay, let's talk about this. And it was so fun because each of those 25 people got real world information of the moment, and I could respond to specific personal questions in a way that would inform and inspire the other people in the room. That was really fun. That
yeah,
kind of thing I love. And it's a way to use my publisher self or with my publisher hat on to help lots of writers figure
yeah,
out that when they are trying to get work into the world, it doesn't mean that their work is bad or wrong if they get a rejection. And to
right,
keep doing the work, and I get to talk a lot about the value of the creative process, whatever your creative endeavor is. So
yeah.
I just get all fired up about that.
No,
Apparently.
I can tell. I can tell. That's amazing, though,
Yeah.
and that should fire you up. Those
Yep.
are the things that uh, people with a kind heart and an empathetic heart, that's what fires them up, is
Yeah.
helping others,
Yeah. It's the
being of
best.
service to others.
Yeah.
That's
And
great.
there's also, I mean, pulling it forward from my little child self in the back of the classroom in fourth grade to now, I think for a long time in my 20s and 30s, I felt like I had to be of service to others more because, well, I didn't know how else to be in the world. I just felt like that was important. But also, whenever I had twinges of self-doubt or fear or confusion or loss, even, I could replenish myself by giving back, but
Yeah,
also I had to come to terms with boundaries at a certain point and realize that giving back and supporting other people is my thing, but my work matters too, and my
yeah,
stories still matter also. And trying to find that balance of like, yes, I can help you, and also now I'm going to go do my own work because this also matters, and turning that care and attention back on myself instead of just giving it all away. That took a couple decades to to figure out.
oh yes, believe me, I know what that's all about. Give As a creative, giving yourself away is probably one of the biggest struggles that we all have in
Mhm.
terms of the business component of being a creative. Um, I've given away so much; I could probably be a millionaire if I charged for all of it.
Well, same. I think about all the free the gifting economy. And what I like about gifting other people time and ideas and conversations is that it is so personal and it is not something that can be replicated by a chat room or by AI or by two different people. And even if they were in the same room under the same circumstances, would have a different conversation. So what's
Yeah,
exciting to me about it is the originality of it and the moments that two people come into a space together to have a conversation. Like our conversation maybe would have been different a month from now than it is today. And how lucky
right.
are we today to be sitting here and having this conversation?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Who knows what the world will look like in a month from now?
Yeah.
Yeah, who knows? If we circle back to stepping into high school
Mhm.
from junior high, was there a huge transition point again for you, kind of like it was at the beginning of a semester in elementary, where it took you that full year to get to a comfortable spot? Was it still the same going into high school?
Not as much.
Ex-
I stayed in the same school, so our
okay,
building changed from eighth grade to ninth grade. We were suddenly in the high
gotcha.
school,
Okay,
but a lot of my peers were the same peers from fifth grade on, and
all
so
right,
I didn't have to start from scratch on relationships and
cool.
friends. And that allowed me to have a little bit more confidence. And then our school also had an artistic focus. And so I felt seen and celebrated as a creative from the start.
Mm.
And then the other really cool thing happened. The school brought in a bunch of young, recently graduated teachers, and they were just on fire with ideas.
Oh
And
wow,
it created such a passionate peculiar learning environment, like the specifics of how these teachers brought their ideas and questions into the school and the classrooms, and what topics we covered. I took an
okay,
amazing political theory class that changed that was my senior year of high school with Jeff Brannigan, and that changed how I saw politics and how I saw groups of people interacting with each other because
yeah,
I found language and terms and philosophies around how people get together and decide to govern themselves or
right,
govern others. And
yeah,
social dynamics shifted when I learned about political structures and systems. Um,
Yeah.
I took a Russian literature course in my sophomore year with one of the younger teachers. And again, that just blew my mind because learning about literature that was created in a different country, originally
Yeah.
in a different language, and
Yeah.
how story structure and humor were used similarly or differently from the US writers I had been reading. So,
Yeah, that was the question that popped into my head was how did you see the differences in the way that it was laid out versus what it would be in America, how it kind of balanced or was even maybe complementary? Because one of the things that I've seen over the years is that some of our own language in America has lost some of its original intent.
mhm,
Um, and I know in other countries, a lot of times they're speaking more directly in a certain way.
mhm.
How did you see that comparison with the way that those were structured compared
Gosh,
to?
it's been a long time. I'm trying to think of what US writers I was reading in ninth and 10th grade, and Steinbeck was one for sure.
Okay.
But um, getting to experience Dostoevsky for the first time
Yeah.
in a Russian lit class and figuring out how the story layers upon the story. Crime and Punishment was a big one. Learning about how a protagonist can go through a series of events and be changed by them. Um, the layers and the depth of the Russian literature and all the characters felt like a different way of conceiving a world in words than
Yeah.
anything I'd ever seen before. And then from there, I got really into the Latin American writers, and then I was totally smitten forever after with Marquez and Allende. So, and I think there was something about reading work that fell outside the bounds of anything I had seen on the page before. I had read a lot of shorter work by US writers. So like Animal Farm is George Orwell.
Mhm.
But still like and John Steinbeck, shorter work that has Willa Cather, I read, trying to think of who else in the olden days of many years ago in high school. But we read a lot of shorter work by major American authors that had you felt like you were going somewhere intentional from the beginning of the book. Like John Steinbeck's The Pearl, everything in there is meant to be and fills a purpose. Whereas with the Russian lit, there were asides and extra characters and shifts in being of the characters that Tolstoy was another one that I read a lot of in high school.
Okay.
Because it was the different model of storytelling made me really excited.
Did it expand the story essentially?
I think so, yeah. Um, the sense of, I mean, the moralistic short form work that I was used to reading in class. I mean, I know we read a lot of short stories too, because you can read it and analyze a short story really easily in the span of a high school class versus reading an 800-page novel or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, I'm sure we also learned story structure at the time, but for me, reading authors from not the US tradition of literature who were working with and through and beyond the tradition of literature in their countries made me realize there are so many different ways to tell a story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've always been a big fan of I laugh that I write long, but it's probably because I read Tolstoy as a teenager.
Right.
And I want that layered complexity in my stories.
Yeah.
And in a draft of my first novel, all the women characters, I had decided that they all mattered, even if they were just walk-on parts. So in one draft, I had every single female character that walked on stage in my novel not only had like a speaking part and a moment in the scene, but the moment they exited the scene, I had like a postscript paragraph about who they grew up to be and where
Oh
they
wow.
landed, how they died. Like it didn't work at all, but the idea of being able to make space for walk-on characters and make sure that my readers knew that these are real, really fully imagined people that
Yeah.
weren't just there to serve the plot. They actually
Right.
had their own stuff going on. It was just a delightful exercise for me, and I can trace that back to Russian storytelling and Latin American storytelling.
Okay. Yeah. I can I can see how that would be very from your perspective very important, number one. And from the other perspective too, you didn't just want them to be someone walking in the background. If we're comparing it to a movie,
Yeah,
essentially, right? You're just not.
yeah,
They're just not background dressing. They're
yeah,
an actual individual who has their own individual story, and you know, they have some flavor, and you need to just experience a little bit of it with the taste of the story.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
very cool. As you're getting towards the junior senior year of high school, have you started to venture into any other creative things outside of writing at all as well? Because
Oh
you're
yeah.
so full
Yeah,
of arts.
I learned how to play the flute in fifth grade, and back then it was me and a friend sitting in a practice room while all the people who learned how to play their instruments in fourth grade practiced in band. I remember sitting with my friend Perul, actually, we would sit and I remember like playing with the keys on the far right side of the flute, and she taught me how to like press one then the other and make it look like they were feet and footsteps walking, and I thought that was delightful. Anyway,
Yeah.
I head over heels for the flute. I practiced incessantly. I spent lunches in the practice room by sophomore year of high school, I think. I would eat my sandwich and go work in the practice room. I thought I would be a musician because I loved music so much. And where in writing, when you're creating something on the page, it can really go anywhere.
Right.
You can make any number of choices, some which will lead you into dead ends, and others which will lead you to new openings and new doors to go through. But with flute, I was always refining my embouchure and always refining my tone and my fingering. And I would play scales for hours, just trying to get my fingers to follow. You get to the point when you're really deep into music that your brain and your fingers work almost subconsciously, they just
Yeah.
fly. And
Yeah.
so I worked on a lot of really hard etudes and different passages, just to keep nailing them and to get better and quicker at my fingering. And
Mm,
it was me versus me all the time. And I would get frustrated sometimes, but most of the time it was a really nice way to channel my perfectionism because I couldn't, there's really no such thing as a perfect sentence, but I could
right.
nail a perfect scale or perfect fingering and also know that I could make it even better next time.
Yeah. That's great. I think a lot of creatives deal with perfectionism as a characteristic that they try to attain. But the reality of it is that perfect is not a human characteristic. It is unattainable. Um, you can get close to it very much, but trying to get there every single time is not going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times artists, musicians, writers would get caught up in that cycle of thinking like that, and it halts the potential of what you can do or could do if you just let some of that go earlier on in life
Yeah. Yeah.
versus trying to keep attaining that as you're moving forward.
Yeah.
But I get it, completely get it.
I
Took
think
me
that's
years.
yeah. Same. And I still learn that lesson, continue to learn that lesson every once in a while. But things like in that novel where I had to cut out all the women's um, stories that I was trying to shoehorn in there, I
Yeah,
knew structurally it was a bad choice and it would slow down the story of my protagonist, but intellectually I wanted to play with it and see if
yeah,
I could get away with it. And I couldn't, but I had so much fun imagining all these little micro endings for all these characters and
yeah,
just the subversively feminist way of making sure these walk-on parts were played by three-dimensional people that I mean I imagine them all, but still there was something about giving them a bigger life off the page, if only in my head, if only as an exercise that
yeah,
combated the perfectionism and allowed me to create a more robust original sound for the novel. Even though they aren't there in the final, you can kind of hear that multi-chorus, multi-voice town
yeah,
sound
yeah.
that I created in part by giving all these women
I
extra
think that's
voice.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect highlight moment for the audience too, is to realize that an idea can be fleshed out completely, even though it may not eventually fit into the final piece, right? But allowing yourself to work through that process, it fills a need within to work through it, right? You've got to work through that in order to get to a resolution point within yourself,
Yeah,
and the allowance to go there. I think that's huge,
yeah.
and I think that's a great thing that creatives need to be able to give themselves permission to do a lot more. Um,
So often we stop ourselves in the midst of creation because it doesn't look right yet, or it isn't good enough, or nobody's going to want this. And the more we talk about that, the less power it can hold over us. So I love that you brought that up.
yeah, for sure. Did Do you still continue to dabble with the music today?
Not really, although all of my novels these days have music in them. And so I've taken
Oh,
that
cool.
background. Over time, I stopped playing the flute as much because it changed how my teeth were. And
Okay.
I started having a lot of jaw pain, which then made it harder to play the flute. So,
Right. Yeah.
um, but I admire the young me who sat for hours with my music stand and practiced
Right.
repetitively. And I just try to channel that into other pursuits these days.
Yeah, that's a fantastic pivot.
Mhm.
Fantastic pivot, because definitely a lot of times just the contortion that takes place with working with an instrument as a musician doesn't always work for everybody,
Yeah,
right? The body does not want to stay in that form to
yeah.
continue to do so. So to be able to recognize that for yourself, and then just to pivot that experience over into your writing, that's
Yeah.
fabulous.
Yeah. And also knitting. And I mean, I don't knit much anymore because of pain. But
Yeah.
I mean, which is part of why I don't do flute anymore either. But channel it into knitting or writing letters, or I make art. I made a lot of art during the pandemic, not
Okay.
because I felt like I could sell anything, but just because I needed a creative outlet and I
Yeah.
wanted to play. And it became a fantastic way to channel some of that creative energy that was separate from the I really want to get published or I should probably
Right.
finish this chapter. It was just I can sit down and doodle. So now I've been sending my kid little doodles of our dog in various positions. Uh,
Very cool.
because my kid's in college, so I figured it's
Okay.
a way I can send home, if
Yeah.
email a little bit. And also they do not have to be good to be silly
Exactly.
and yeah.
Very cool. As you're getting closer to the end of high school, are you starting to think about going to college, or was there maybe a different aspiration at that point?
No, I knew I'd go to college. I liked learning too much, and I was at a prep school where everybody was going to college, so I didn't really
Okay.
think too much about it.
Just decided that was for sure going to be the path.
Yep.
Okay. And thinking about where you're going to go at that point in time, was there some key places in mind that may have been a choice based on what you wanted to do career wise?
Yeah, I mean, I knew I wanted to go to a small liberal arts school and probably major in English, so that's what I did. I
Okay.
ended up going to Vassar in part because F. Scott Fitzgerald's daughter Scotty went to Vassar.
Okay.
But
Well, hey, if
yeah,
there's something that inspires a person to go to a specific place, then all the better.
yeah, for sure.
At least you take that step.
Yeah.
Did that transition um, have part of that elementary school anxiety
Oh, for sure.
arise back up? Okay.
For sure. I had a really rough 4 years of college
All
and
right.
I never quite made it out the way I did from elementary school to fifth grade. I never made that transition out to be wholly in myself.
Okay.
And I had looked forward to it so much because I heard college would be even better than high school, and it wasn't. I loved my high school and even my middle school years were great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so I was lost for a long time during college and after college, and it took probably till moving out to Oregon and starting from scratch with no safety net and starting to build writer relationships in Portland and go to bookstore events. We have Powell's City of Books here, which is the largest bookstore in the United States. And so I could
Okay.
go there and see all these books on the shelves and I kind of rebuilt what was broken in me and found that's moving to Oregon was the next level up. College was definitely like a level down, in terms
Got
of
you.
my development.
Do you, do you feel comfortable talking about some of those instances in college that may have cracked some of that spirit?
Some of it was academic expectations. I felt like an
Okay.
outsider again.
Yeah.
Some of it was falling prey to a relationship that
Okay.
was built on control in a way that
Okay.
I didn't understand at the time because I was so naive and I was so back to that quiet in my shell
Yeah. Yeah.
person. I did some good work in college, but I never found the intellectual surprise of it the way I did in high school. And I felt like when I thought I was contributing, I didn't get the kind of reassurance or appreciation or understanding. I didn't have any one professor who loved me the way all my high school teachers did.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
feel like I fell through the cracks. It was the wrong place for me, probably. So,
Got you. Yeah, that's disappointing. Um, I just had a conversation last night about a local art school here in Metro Detroit. Um, and the conversation was literally just about how that the staff wanted to do something a certain way and it wasn't really for the benefit of the student. It's just the way they wanted to do it. And I've seen that so often and many times, even in my own college attempt. Um, my first year at college in basic drawing, um, and mind you, I was given the gift of creativity. I was creating as soon as I could hold a crayon, building stuff with Lincoln logs, Legos, all that kind of stuff. Like my world, I was creating worlds at that point. So it wasn't really a far stretch for me to be able to go into the drawing class and learn some of the uh, structure of how you need to put together a composition of a piece. But my teacher had mentioned to my parents at uh, an event that the college was hosting where parents could come in and see what you've accomplished so far in the year and get an understanding of what you're dealing with on campus. And that teacher told my parents flat out, he'll never be more than a B+ student. And I was like, what the hell am I even trying for then?
Oh, I'm so
If,
sorry that happened.
yeah, it's like if that's the case, then why am I even taking this class? If that's where I'm gonna end up, why am I doing this? So in my mind, I'm like, all right, well, I'm gonna prove them wrong. So trying to be that perfectionist, went hard into the next project, turned it in, ended up getting an A- on it, but at least I was like, all right, didn't get stuck in that B+ range. So thanks. See you never again.
Yeah. I proved it to myself that
Exactly.
you couldn't
Exactly.
see. Yeah.
I think it's so disappointing from my perspective as a working creative to hear how teachers can be almost detrimental to the progress of a creative, um, because of the way they feel about that process
Yeah.
versus what might be the best for that individual. Because
Yeah.
that's the thing about creatives for sure, and many other people. Everybody is different.
Mhm.
Nobody learns the exact same way. People pick up on things completely different than everybody else does. The individuality is not highlighted enough, I don't think, in our society at this day and age. Um, and so it's always disappointing when I hear another story of where you were kind of let down by instructors at a crucial point in development
Yeah.
in terms of setting you up for life
I
thereafter.
I appreciate this so much because for so many years I felt like college was my fault, and
Oh no.
I think to be able to shift that lens and look at it as I fell through the system and that the teachers who were there to inspire me
Did not
did
know.
not hit those marks or who were detrimental, like you said.
Yeah.
I had one in eighth grade at that school that I loved, and I still remember the little harsh moments with that teacher, but next door was my seventh grade teacher, and on the other side of the building was my sixth grade teacher, and at the elementary school was my fifth grade Mrs. Rabus. So
Yeah.
I never believed how she saw me. And I actually
Nice.
stood up a little bit. I got a grade on a poem that had no, it was like a B or a B- on a poem that I had gotten published. And I was in eighth grade. And so I was
Right.
working hard and I was submitting poems and I got this one published. And I turned it in for an assignment. Maybe it had been contracted to be published. I can't remember. But she only said good things about it. And I was like, then can you please explain my grade? And she
Right.
held it for like a couple of months. And I finally was like, can I have that poem back? Because maybe I was submitting it. It did get published. Maybe I was submitting it at that point and I wanted the one copy I had back.
Sure.
And she turned it back in and she had whited out the B and she put an A or an A- over the B because
Uh,
she just didn't like it.
right.
And to me, that was so mind-blowing that a teacher could just not like your work and grade it based on their feelings. And
Right.
also, I was so taken care of at that school by everybody else that it upset me, but I could see it as a failure of the system or a clash between what she expected and what I do creatively. It never came to roost in my heart and gut as me being bad. The way
For sure.
college felt like I was the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Let that go.
Yeah.
Let that go.
Okay.
That was their fault. That was
Yeah.
their mistakes.
Yeah.
Nothing of that was yours at
Yeah.
all. Just let it fly out the window.
I love that. Nothing of that was yours. We take being sensitive people, we take
Oh, for sure.
all of this so personally. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, none of that was yours. I will keep repeating that to myself and get it to
Good.
stick. So, yeah,
Excellent.
thank
Excellent.
you.
So as you're stepping out into the world and you're still feeling some of that weight of having done those 4 years, what is your what is your first move to maybe attempt to do something creative, or did you think I just need to just work, make some money, and figure something else out?
I was working at a newspaper, so I was learning how to tell stories after
Okay.
college. And I guess I was always writing a novel on the side. Poetry was big for me in high school, and I think college sapped it out of me, and I stopped writing poems, but I was working on books over time. And after about a year at a community newspaper where I was staying up past midnight and just working really hard, and feeling exhausted all the time, I left that job to freelance. And I wrote for a local magazine and I worked part-time for a school district. And I would go on my lunch hour on my school board school days and I would work on my own writing at lunchtime. And that's when the balance started coming back. And I started focusing on the fact that I had something to say, or I didn't know what I had to say, but I knew I loved putting the language together to say something. And if I kept practicing, I would figure out what my story was or what my themes were, what
Yeah.
true meant to me.
Okay. And you mentioned that during during college rather, you were in a relationship that was a little bit controlling, slightly abusive from that controlling aspect. But you also mentioned in one part of the conversation earlier too, that you have a child.
Mhm.
At a certain point, did you start to get to a place where you felt comfortable enough to try to experience um, a relationship again? And was it a better, more cohesive relationship at that point?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're still married.
Okay,
I have two kids and
cool.
we've been married for over 20 years.
Oh,
So,
amazing!
yeah, yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you. And I dated some in between, but I met someone who acknowledged and appreciated my creativity and my spirit and my silliness. And yeah, it's been great.
That's
Continues to be
amazing.
great.
Cool.
So
Very cool. I'm glad.
yeah,
I'm glad
yeah.
because a lot of times those experiences, um, for many people, seem to just continue to be the same situation for them.
Yep. Yep.
Um, and it's sad, disappointing. But
I
when go ahead.
Oh yeah, I think if I had believed in myself more in college, I would have figured it out and gotten out of that sooner, but I didn't believe in myself. And so
Right,
it
right.
was easy to believe the toxic narratives and think that I wasn't worth anything. So it takes years and a lot of hard work to subvert a narrative that somebody else puts around you.
Absolutely. And again, too, it that even wasn't your fault because you had an environment from fifth grade into sixth, seventh, and eighth where you were getting this encouragement, right? It wasn't controlling. It was just, here's what you need to do. You're doing it. You're
Keep
good
going.
at it.
Mhm.
Yes, keep going. And then you're in this other environment. And so the external world, even around the relationship, is just disappointment, disappointment, disappointment. And you're falling into this almost cocoon type state to try and manage. And then that opens the door to somebody's saying you should do something a certain way, and if you don't, otherwise it's gonna, upset the situation or
Yeah.
whatever. So I feel like it becomes an environmental component on top of the individual that kind of beats down that spirit to a place where then it just falls into, okay, I just got to keep moving like this in order to survive.
Yeah.
So again, not a thing that was your fault. It was just an environmental situation that compounded upon itself. And fortunately, you were able to get to a place where that just disappeared and stepped into a relationship that's now 20 years long
Yeah.
and two wonderful children on top of it. Even
Yeah.
bonus. That's great.
Yeah. It's incredible. And I think some of that had to do with moving to Oregon and wanting to reset
Yeah.
and being open to a reset. I remember it being really scary to move somewhere I'd never been before and just get in the car and come out here. But shifting the terrain, the outside terrain,
Yeah.
shifted the interior, and made space for hope and whimsy and really amazing giant weeds. We have weeds out here that grow taller than human beings because of all the rain. And I just remember standing at the parking lot of my newspaper job, calling my mom at home and being like, "Oh my gosh, I'm standing next to like a weed and it is 6 foot tall."
Right.
And it's in the crack. It's in concrete, it's in asphalt, and here's this weed and there's something about that survival and
Yes.
the landscape of like surviving and growing taller despite being encroached on by all sides. And that's such a metaphor for creativity and for
Oh,
like
for sure.
preserving who we are and continuing to reach for the light when everything feels bleak.
Yes. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautifully worded.
Thank you.
That was another highlight moment in the episode here. Um, yeah, that is something profound. That there's always a possibility of overcoming because of what's being put on top of you.
Yeah.
Definitely. But one of the other things I want to highlight, and you just touched on it real quick, was the fact that it was very scary to make a move to go across country, essentially.
Yeah.
What was the internal compass pointing to that allowed you to step into that and do it regardless of the fear?
Well, I felt like I had knocked down enough pillars in my life, or I had let them get knocked down,
Yeah.
that I had space to build something back up. A
Okay.
friend of mine from a summer job was moving out to Oregon and said, "Hey, we could go together and be roommates." And so, from the practical standpoint, Tamara guide was my guide, and I just got in the car and came out here with a different friend. We road tripped actually in September 2001. So we are now at the I've been here 24 years.
Yeah.
And it was right after 9/11, and we drove through the country in those harrowing, strange days, not knowing what was going to be here when I got here. And I think the idea of needing a new landscape, I think I
Yeah.
really needed that external landscape to be able to heal the internal one and not get stuck in
Mm-hmm.
the bleakness of where I had landed. Um,
Right.
and to step away from blaming myself from where I had landed. I mean,
Sure.
and to acknowledge like these things have happened and I was gullible and I was, so willing to shift myself to fit in with the landscape. Now I need to go somewhere completely different. And I remember walking into Powell's and seeing all these books and like I always did at Barnes and Noble or whatever little
Yeah.
bookstore in my travels, I went to the shelf and found my last name or where it would be on the fiction shelves. I'm like, okay, here's my
Yeah.
goal. I'm gonna get there. And then in 2022, my name was up on the marquee in lights, Laura Stanfill, um, with my debut novel. And I got to bring my family, my parents, and my kids, and my husband. And we took pictures outside of the marquee. And I was like, this is it. This is all this time I have been rebuilding this landscape, interior landscape,
Yeah,
to self-actualize what I've always wanted, which was having a book out in the world.
yeah, for sure.
And meanwhile, I've created that space and built a place for everyone else to have their books out. Not everyone else, but lots of other people
Sure, sure.
through publishing and teaching.
Yeah, the other thing that I'm seeing that's very fascinating is the fact that Oregon is kindly, I mean, the landscape of Oregon is very much nature oriented.
Yep.
You the you have an opportunity to step outside of the city and step straight into nature
Mhm.
and have it full on
Yep.
versus in a more developed city or state on the East Coast. Um, and I think that's a fantastic um, element that not all individuals can see in everyday life that is very helpful in terms of renewing one's spirit, oneself.
Yep.
Um, One of the things that I kind of throw out to the audience at different times is the opportunity. If you're feeling down, you're feeling drained, or you're feeling disconnected, if you just take your shoes and socks off, walk out into the backyard, and just stand in the grass or stand by the tree that's out there, I can almost pretty much guarantee within about 15 minutes, a lot of that you're feeling is going to just start to fade off of you.
Mhm.
And I think that's just the healing power of nature, um,
Yeah.
is being able to connect and be that thing for humans that a lot of times and too often it's taken for granted. It's cast aside, but yet it, nature is still always there, and
Mhm.
it doesn't give up on us as humans. It'll continue to even regenerate
Yeah.
after so many disastrous things can take place to it. Um, Perfect example is the one of the nuclear plants. I forget where it actually is, um, where they had the nuclear reactor that I don't think it exploded, but it had a leak, and they had to evacuate the entire compound. And for so many years, it was just left abandoned. Um, but if you're looking at pictures of it today, the vegetation has come back and started to take back over that concrete environment. Um, and I think that in and of itself is just says how powerful nature is,
For sure.
what it can do to regenerate.
We have a grapevine in the backyard that has been cut back over the years, and it keeps coming back. And this year, we have two different kinds of grapes on it. We've only ever had red Concords, but this year we have these green grapes that are, at first, I thought they must just be Concords that haven't gotten enough sun yet. But then
Yeah.
I tried one, and they're soft and they're sweet and they're delicious. And it's like that grapevine is kind of a mess, and also it keeps producing.
Yep.
And the deliciousness is unparalleled. You can't go into a store and get a grape like I can get
Oh, for sure.
my back fence. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Not even close to comparison.
yep.
That's amazing. Once you got that first book on that shelf, um, what did you do next in terms of, all right, I've made it in a sense because I'm there. I'm in that space that I was looking at and dreaming about. But what do I do now?
I kept writing because that's what I do. I always write.
Okay.
And I shifted back into a nonfiction project that I've been working on for a long time. It's a book for writers about creativity and loosely how to get published. But I really wanted to start with if you're spending time writing, you get to call yourself a writer or a novelist or a poet or whatever you want. You get to own your terms. Nothing about the publishing industry can take away the fact that you're writing. Like, sure, you can write for years and not get published. I've done it, but that doesn't diminish your capacity for writing or the amazingness of you having carved out time in your life to write, to do the work of writing. And I would say
Yeah.
the same thing for painting or music or theater or whatever your creative love is. So I had been interviewing agents and editors and authors and publishers for this book, and it took until getting that novel out that where I felt suddenly empowered to put my own story of trying and failing and trying again into the book to be kind of the spine, the story that connects all the publishing pieces is my story. I had an agent. She didn't sell my book. I wrote her another book. 2008 happened and the economy crashed and she was like, this is a better book, but I can't sell this now. Nobody's buying books like this.
Yeah.
So picking myself up time and time again and continuing to write and still being playful, still thinking, I wonder what would happen if I give all these women a full micro story arc that takes us away from the main character. Can I pull that off? What do I learn when that doesn't actually work? How did that shift thematically my intent with my women characters in future books, so forth and so on. So I put all my stuff into the book also, and then it came out in April. So
Nice.
yeah,
Nice. Again, highlight moment, stepping outside of a normal structure
mhm.
to get done what you wanted to get done.
Yeah,
That I think that needs to be a huge message for the creative community to always be curious, to explore, to go beyond, to you know step outside the box some of the times, if not often, um, so that you can see what the possibilities are
yeah,
because it can be so huge.
for
Can be so
sure.
huge.
Yeah, I love that, and it's that feels so true to me as a writer. And something that's so important, I think when writers come to me and they're starting off, they want their books on the shelves, like that dream that I've carried with me since second grade.
Yeah.
They look at what's already there and they think, how can I add to this? And
Hmm.
sometimes we go too far down that path of like, well, zombie novels are selling. I should write a book about a zombie.
Right.
Instead of starting with that little kid in fourth grade who was sitting in the back of the class thinking, gosh, I have so much to say and I can't say it because I don't feel safe enough yet, but I can write it down.
Yeah.
Honoring that creative spark and where our interest comes from is so important. And people always come to me for publishing advice because I'm a book publisher and I know how the industry works. But in my book, Imagine a Door, it felt so important to back up and talk about what it means to call yourself a writer, what it means to take up space in the world as a creative person, especially before you get published, because so much of the work is being done with no immediate reward. I mean, you can reward yourself, like get a snack after you've worked for an hour, or like you hit your 1,000 word a day limit, so now you can move on to everything else. You can go sit under the tree barefoot or
Yeah.
whatever your reward is. But um, the process, I think so much when we talk about process with writing, it becomes how do you get the work into the world? And we forget the magic of the process being circuitous or um not like anybody else's process.
For sure.
And we need to honor that because that's where the magic comes from.
Yes.
You can learn how to get an agent, you can learn how to submit to small presses, you can figure out publicity down the road. But when we get hung up on circling those goals, we forget that part of the process is sitting under the tree and looking up and thinking about the world or thinking about Tolstoy.
Yeah, exactly. Highlight of the moment again.
It never occurred to me. My novel is set in the 19th century and it's whimsical and it has lots of characters and it's omniscient. And I, not until talking to you today, did I think that, wow, I probably wrote my own version of a Russian novel. Like that
Classic.
from a place of whimsy and exploration and seeing how much I could get away with.
Right.
And that's the book that sold. It wasn't the books, none of the books that I wrote based on what I thought people wanted me to write, none of those actually worked. It was the
Yeah.
book that I had nobody waiting for, that I just played with and revised over 15 years of trying something out and seeing if I could make it stick. And if it didn't, I just would go on and do something else. That
Right.
playful book was the one that sold. And I just sold another book this spring. It's coming out in November 2026. It's another novel. It's about a female composer on Tin Pan Alley. So it's again mixing my music background
Yeah. Yeah.
with
Nice.
historical magical fiction,
Right.
what I do. And again, it's a book that nobody else could have written. So
For sure.
yeah.
For sure. Because it's coming from your experiences,
Yep.
the things that shaped you, the
Yep.
things that became colorful for your
Yep.
life.
Yeah, exactly.
That's fantastic.
That one particularly is set in the house I grew up in on our tree line street in New Jersey. So I got to
Oh,
revisit a crucial part of my history. I got to revisit the place where Bess and I built our friendship. We used to sit under the pianos in the dining room and find jelly beans that the Easter Bunny would leave behind and the air horns. And so it's a story of friendship. So I see Bess weaving all the way through that book. So
that's amazing. I had just written a note to myself to um, see how Bess comes back into the storyline.
yeah, that's amazing.
And you
Yeah,
literally just talk about it.
she has been there my whole life, and I think I wouldn't have had the courage to start over. I wouldn't have had the courage to keep writing. I wouldn't have had the courage to face rejections, pure rejections, industry rejections, jobs that I didn't get, any of it, um,
Yeah.
without her by my side. And I also some of our epic stories we tell looking back and remembering the old days show the space, the empty space between us and how different, even though, I mean, we partly grew up together.
Yeah.
She moved around a lot. And so there's a lot of empty space where her experience and mine were different, but she still came and met me in
Yeah.
that space of curiosity and unknowing. And I remember she laughs. I had forgotten at the time. I was 10 years old and I wrote a paper about Chopin. And
Oh,
not only
wow.
was it a paper, I wrote a kind of a short story about Chopin's life and death. And I had done some deep research, but it was like, setting the scene of one day Chopin's parents came in, they heard this amazing piano music in the living room, and they came downstairs to find their little child playing something he had heard,
Right.
some music he had heard, and he had been able to play it by ear. Anyway, I'd written this whole like love letter to Chopin at 10, and Bess was visiting and she saw my paper like carefully set out. I probably had set it out on the desk to impress her. Maybe
Right.
I don't remember, but she remembers picking it up and going, Chopin? Who's Chopin? And I was like, you don't know who Chopin is? And I mean, I see Bess as being a lot more worldly in
Okay.
things that were important to our peers in middle school, whereas I had written this whole like 19th century treatise on a
Right.
famous composer that she had never heard of.
Right.
And we go back to the hilarity of that moment where her lived experience and mine were really in two separate bubbles. And
Yeah.
yet she asked a question about it. And I was like, no, he's a famous composer. And I let her read this paper.
That's amazing. It-
Oh,
What's fascinating for me as well is you're 10 years old
mhm.
writing that.
Yeah,
Did did that interest come out of maybe your dad's influence with the organ?
for sure. We
Okay,
didn't have the organ set up at the time. It was in boxes
gotcha.
in a neighbor lady's garage. But yeah, there, I mean, I'm sure I had a little bibliography and I quoted some books about Chopin. And so I'm sure they were in the den where my parents kept their
Gotcha.
music books. And
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
sure I pulled out these autobiographies or these
Yeah.
biographies of this famous composer and decided, oh, I could write about him.
Yeah. That's it's so fascinating because a 10-year-old mind, you think, doesn't have that um, capacity
Mhm.
to think in that way. Which, again, I think that's another thing that sets you out as an individual, sets you
Mhm.
out from the crowd as an individual, um, is that ability to think about another creative and want to tell that creative story
Mhm.
in your own words and how
Yeah.
you're experiencing him and how you're experiencing the work that he did and his music, all that type of thing. At 10 years old, wow.
And it's so interesting too that his story was as a prodigy
Yeah.
and he was recognized by the adults around him. And that was that, probably I wrote it in fifth grade. I don't know. I'm guessing, right? Where I felt suddenly recognized and appreciated by the established
Yep.
teachers, by the establishment. And I mean, over and over again, I was told that I had something to give the world. And even in my deepest, darkest moments where I didn't believe that personally, Bess did. And I also remembered my parents, of course, have always been supportive of my artwork and my mom's, there's a whole treasure trove archive of my life in writing and my life in art. And in fact, that Chopin paper still exists because my mother kept it, and she
Oh,
also
wonderful.
would make copies and send things to my grandma. So maybe the Chopin one is because my grandma kept it and
Okay.
put all of my treasures in binders, and I have like 8 different binders from childhood full of my work. And
Oh,
it's
that's
real
amazing.
work. And that's how I can tell you today that at 10, I was actually writing and imagining this moment of Chopin's parents being shocked by his brilliance and
Yes,
certainly wanting to be that kind of person. And I wanted to be different in that way because that was socially acceptable and because it was so surprising
for
to
sure.
hear a young boy making this incredible music
Yep,
with no training.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then you, as a little girl, writing these stories that everybody's looking at you and like, holy cow, holy cow.
Where did this come from? This
Exactly.
quiet kid. Uh,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. If we're looking and giving the audience, writers that are out there in the world, some advice in terms of should I self-publish? Should I get an agent? Should I try to go to a big publisher? Should I go with a smaller publisher, perhaps like yourself? What advice do you have for those creators that are just starting on their writing journey or even stepping into a place where they think they want to finish something off? Which direction would you advise them to move into and why?
Depends on your goals, really. I thought I always, I mean, that little kid at 10
Yeah.
writing about Chopin, I always wanted a big deal with a lot of money through an agent selling my book to New York. But it turns out I do not write books that fit into a particular mold. I am a rather eccentric creative, and I do things my own way, and I challenge structure and try to write something that nobody else but me could write, which means I am a great fit for small presses. But it took me a lot, it took me two agents and a lot of rejections from New York to realize that I could sell my debut novel to a small press. And then I knew for my second novel that I wanted to sell it to a small press. Of course, now I'm writing middle grade, and I probably will need to go find an agent and figure out how to write me at 10, right like myself at 10 for kids like me, and also fit into some of the commercial parameters if I want to get an agent. There are not a lot of small presses that work with children's books because the price points don't work out very well. You have to make objects that are going to sell a lot of copies because the price point has to be low enough for teachers and grandparents and parents, and kids with gift certificates for their birthdays will come in and actually
Right.
buy the books.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm about to shift in my career and go back into the agent world with my middle grade novel. Um,
Okay.
but there is no one way, and once you start one way, you can always shift. I
Yeah.
have one author who's self-published because her name is Keisha Ajose Fisher, and she's a Nigerian American author. And she
Okay.
wrote a story collection, and she said, I wasn't going to wait for anybody else to give me my chance. I wrote my book, and I decided I didn't need anyone else to say yes to me. I was saying yes to myself. She's self-published. She won the Oregon Book Award with it in, I think, 2022. Her book is called No God Like the Mother. And then the company that helped her self-publish went out of business, and I jumped in and negotiated with her agent to get the rights. And her book is
Yes.
still selling. We put an updated cover on it based on the original cover, and she has a storied career speaking to writers and people about her work, and she's working on a memoir. She has an agent. She did it all backwards, but she did it based on
Fantastic.
what she wanted, and it worked for her. And I
Yeah.
think if she had tried to go another way, um your results may vary, but but I
Exactly.
think she really inspired me in terms of deciding that she had waited too long for other people to give her a shot and to see what she was doing, and she was just going to do it her way. So I never prescribe a one way is best. I prescribe to writers really go deep inside yourself and think about what your goal is. Do you want a book on a bookstore shelf? You can accomplish that in many ways. Here are a bunch of the ways.
Yeah.
Um, do you want to just share your stories? You could start speaking in open mic nights. I went to a writing workshop where I was a featured speaker maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and one of the speakers teaches on cruise ships. She makes up her own presentations, usually about literary figures, and she presents them on cruise ships. And it is writing, it is art, and it's highly entertaining. And she gets this remarkable life experience out of getting paid to go on adventures and
Right.
teach people about Beatrix Potter or
Yeah.
whoever. So
Yeah.
it's there's no one wrong way or right way to share your work. But if you can come to sharing the work from what your wishes are and what your goals are for sharing that, you can cut through a lot of the red tape that other people put around your creative process. And you can find your way to getting it shared with people who need to hear what you have to say or what you have to sing or what you have to show as an artist.
Yeah. I think that's a fantastic story. The fact that she decided, I'm not waiting for other people any longer.
Yeah.
I'm stepping forward and I'm doing this for myself.
And she did it successfully, beautifully, and
Yeah.
the agents came to her,
Yeah.
and the readers came to her, and the book festivals have come to her asking her to come speak. She's won
Yeah.
awards. It's Keisha is remarkable and a remarkable talent, and I can't wait to see what she writes next. But I
That's
love her
very cool.
story as a reminder that we can do it however we want to do it.
Yes, exactly. Creatives listening. Pay attention. That was a key moment. Rewind this, listen to it again at this point. You need to quit waiting on other people to accomplish your dream. Move forward, take it in your own hands, and watch what happens because it's going to not be the way you think it should have happened. It's going to be different. It's going to go in a way that's probably going to blow your mind and make you realize you've been sitting on something for way too long. It doesn't matter if you're a painter, a musician, a songwriter, a sculptor, a hairstylist. Open the salon. Quit waiting to get permission from somebody else. Whatever. Makeup artists, fashion designers. Start building that line of clothing. If you don't want to do the line of clothing, start doing the couture pieces.
Mhm.
Outside the box. Do your thing. She just told you a story of somebody who said, I'm not waiting on anybody else any longer. And that's an amazing story, Laura.
Thank
That's exactly what the audience needed to hear, especially today, I think, because there's so many times where us as creatives, we don't have enough drive inside of us for whatever reasons, whether it's just societal um, constraints, environmental constraints, family constraints, any of the things above. Um, they just play into stuff that doesn't allow us to grow up through the crack in the concrete, like those weeds that you have in Oregon that become taller than any human around them, right? Those are the things that take place. And I think that's where us as creatives need to step outside of what we think is the right way to do it and just move forward and do it.
you. Yeah. I mean, I founded a publishing house with no experience because I saw that I had the skills. I could edit and I could do layout because of my newspaper days and I could collect talent and get the word out because I knew how from the newspaper side how publicity worked. And
Yes.
I just did it because I felt like I don't have to wait for someone else to tell me that I have space in the literary community. I can just make my own space on the outside of the popular kids or the really famous people or whatever. And I could just make a little spot for all of us outsiders. And it's grown since then. But I think that's why too I recognized Keisha's spirit and talent. And when I had the opportunity to acquire her book and get it out to a new set of readers, I was like, I would love to do this with you. And I feel
Yeah,
lucky that we got to work together and that I get to bask in some of that spirit of hers.
for sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, that's amazing. You're able to do for others at this point in time what those fifth, sixth, and seventh, eighth grade teachers did for you,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They recognize that unique spirit, that unique thing about the individual person
Mhm.
that was just like, we have to nurture this. We have to protect this. We have
Yeah.
to encourage this to move forward.
Yeah. And they sure did. So,
Yeah, that's fantastic. I appreciate that you're doing that from the outside as another creative um, because it, it takes courage to step outside our comfort zone. But if we step outside our comfort zone with the intent of helping others, it helps build that courage and it helps chop away those anxieties, those doubts that play around in our mind all the time. Um, so amazing.
all those negative thought patterns that stop us from doing the work, from ever getting to the page or getting to the
Yeah,
cord or getting to the paintbrush. Yeah,
exactly.
love it.
Exactly.
Well said.
Thank you. I think this is a great place for us to end today because it's on a high note. It's a key moment that needs to be highlighted anyways. And I think I don't want to overshadow it because it was big, by just trying to go forward. One of the things that I always want to remind the audience at the end of each one of these episodes is exactly what Keisha did, exactly what you did in your life and career, is always listen to your heart. But on the other hand, always remember, be kind to your mind.